I wanted to give you some updates this morning. We're here to talk about the transaction monitoring system and what we've created, the program we've created around that, and where we're going and what the updates are. So we're here to talk about the system formerly known as Actio. And that's kind of a key, formerly known as Actio. So we've been going under pseudonyms this whole time and working as the Fraud Risk Management Group, Fid Crime Management Group, kind of depending on what you would like, the Center of Excellence, etc. But these names are all going to change pretty quick. We are in pre-launch mode and have been, and we all tend to forget that. So we need to keep that. We need to realize that pretty soon we're going to launch at some point in time. But we are functioning, we are running, and we are 100%. So we've been focusing on fraud. We're the Center of Excellence. We're who you've been dealing with, right? That's not going to change. But the transaction system, formerly known as Actio, is now eCUDA. We'll let that sink in for a second. Fine. Okay, no one threw a fit. So, oh, sorry. There we go, eCUDA. I'm on my screen. So we're now called eCUDA, which is a Swahili name, mostly, right? So we took several words, just like you do with Mojaloop, and put them together. So echo, which means equity or fairness, and it's not Swahili, right? It's just a phrase. CUDA means typically built to provide protection. Kutazama means to watch, and I'm sure I butchered all that. So I apologize for folks that actually speak Swahili. I definitely Americanized stuff. The first thing we did, Matt and I, is we went eCUDA. That sounds really cool. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right, so I apologize. But we've come up with this, we've branded this, we're doing the trademark on it, we've done all this stuff. We've got the domain name, all that's flying forward. So we are officially eCUDA. That said, let's talk about eCUDA. So this is the real presentation. So on eCUDA, I am Greg McCormick, which if you didn't know, which is most of you know. There we go. I'm the executive director. We have Reica Rampersadh, who is the programs director, and we have Jess with us, who is the product manager. So why are we here? What were we created? Last year, an estimated 293 million reports came in on scams. That's 293 million. 55.3 billion was lost in those scams. All right, that's a worldwide number. That's unreal. The reality is that's just scams. We have 31 other active typologies in the system. So how much are you actually losing? You know, we have about 290 in general, but we've made the most prevalent 30 or so active. We've got 31 other ones. So we've got 32 in there. This is, I find, very interesting. So Lloyd's of London, which I think everybody's familiar with, came up with this, was asked if they had to do a payout, what would be the payout? So the payment system, if it was hit by a cyber attack, could cost as much as $3.5 trillion. All right, that's huge. That's just one. All right, potentially just one scam could cause that much damage that hits the world economy. All right. So why are we here? We're here, yes, we're here for financial inclusion. All right, but we're here to make you feel safe using the system. That's the goal. We're here to protect people, business, and governments. Right, so we protect the whole ecosystem, and hopefully people will feel safe using the system. Here's the other news. So we're going to be joining the Linux Foundation. So we'll actually be a project under the Linux Foundation. You know, I'll talk in a bit about why we chose to do that. And there's going to be two organizations. One organization is completely open source. You can see everything, all the repositories, everything. And that's the normal way to do it. But there is actually, we have kind of a rules body, or what fits their concept of rules body, in that we want to protect from the, the topologies and the other things. And so we're going to do a separate JDF or a joint development fund for that, because that can operate in that way. So why do we choose the Linux Foundation? Why not Mojaloop, or why not our own foundation? We have different use cases from you guys, hugely, right? You use Kafka for a reason. Everything needs to be mutable. Everything needs to be 100%. We don't have to be that, right? We're in the case of fraud is very much like economies, all right? So larger than it otherwise would have been, smaller than it otherwise would have been, et cetera, works, right? As long as smaller or larger is the amount that you want. So we're going to reduce fraud to be 10% of what comes with the system. One person I know actually had a goal, or had a metric, 5% was his goal, right? That's hard to reach. So we're very different from you guys, but what does this mean for you, and what are we going to be doing? The Center of Excellence, which I don't even know if that's going to be our name. I don't. Are we going to be the CUTA Center of Excellence? Are we going to be the Fraud Center of Excellence? Are we going to be FinCrime? I'm not sure. We'll work on that part next. It's still around, still produces the product, still produces the training guides, still does the skills transfer, and we're here to help you with that and all your, to a certain extent, regulatory needs, right? Because that ties in pretty heavily with what we do. Linux neutrality scales, and their neutrality, the way they scale and the way they scale access is huge, right? From our standpoint, that was big. I was taking a look at, do we want to use Rust as a core system, right? Do we want to use Rust because we're closer to the bare metal? We have to do really fast responses. We're running at 2000 TPS a second right now. That's fast, all right? We wanted to talk to them, wanted to get some expertise. I wanted to talk to Rust and find out what's going on. They gave me the name of the CEO, all right? I can't get that elsewhere. We had problems with performance on Node. They give us the name of Nearford and said, talk to them, which thank you very much, where Marco is. And we worked in that manner. So they've been very helpful. So the membership base standards organization, that's the part that helps you safeguard against the IP against other people, right? Against bad actors. So this other mechanism that deals with standards lets us hide all the topology information, hide all the rules, keep that away. And we're going to figure out how to make it worth more, right? So that you can collaborate on the creation of topologies and things like that. So those URLs are hidden. There's no direct access, things like that. And we can have secured access to the repositories. So that's why we have to split in two. As part of their mandate, they have to be completely open, but not as a standards body. Standards bodies can keep that in. So what does this mean for you? All right. On one hand, it means nothing. We're here. We're not going away. The product is completely available. But on the other hand, it means that we have deeper access to all the open source products that are out there. We have access to people that have been peers forever. And this is different than Paula, wherever Paula is, because Paula came from that direction. She came from Linux. So to her, she already knows most of these people because that's what she's been doing. You guys don't need that. You're pushing different mission. You're trying to get the switch out there, if you will. That's not really the case for us. If you think about it, we're more an add-on, right? We're like a utility that gets added onto any switch, right? Or any type of system. Because at the end of the day, all we are is a detection engine. So that means that if you want to write this for insurance or something like that, you can do that. You have the ability. We're definitely set up to handle that. But for us, it's important that we all have deeper access, deeper controls. I wanted to say a special thanks. I think most of you know that during the MVP, we had two partners that primarily worked on that, Cyber and Lexego. And I'd say pretty equal in design and development of that. That was nice. But right now I wanted to call them out because I don't think we've really done that before. And Cyber does most of the maintenance and support on the project. And any new backend features that deal with performance, how things operate, stuff like that, as well as they have a suite of their own products. Lextego is working on the new visual admin, the visual rules builder, the topology builder. You know, we made a decision to get that right first, so the underlying tech is all right. Now it's time to add on top of that and give you guys something to make it easier to implement. So that was kind of the whole mission. You know, is not only do we want to give this to you where it's not being done, not only do we want to create this public good, but we want to do it in an easy manner so you actually use it. All right. I can think of lots of places that have been given a lot of software. So thank you, Nearform, by the way, on the performance. That was a huge help. I don't see Marco, but and we'll leave it at that. But I wanted to get you with this part. Yeah. Oh shit! Am I doing it again? Sorry. So I wanted to give you this as well. There's a lot of interest in this, and we'll probably do a lot more installs than Mojalo. All right. So, and the reason being is you're doing the central switch. There's going to be one of you, right? We're touching, in theory, every bank, every fintech, everybody in the area. So when we talk to, for example, BCAO, right, who is somebody that we're talking to, you know, that's, I think, 8 countries, right? So it's them plus 8 countries that need something like this. But it's not just the 8 countries. It's the 200 banks in that system as well, is the potential. So yeah, in one sense, our job is a lot easier, right? You know, to spread the word because we can, you know, connect to everybody, right? So we have 12 national switches we're talking to. We have 8 special purpose switches, and that covers 58 countries. So thank you, Kamisa, for that, because you gave us a huge number. I appreciate that. And we got to add that in. So we're starting to get out there, and this is all pre-launch. All right. So all pre-launch. Yeah. And thank you, Michael. So appreciate it. So African has been big in this as well. We're interested in POCs. We're interested in implementations. So just reach out to us. That's what we're here for. And hopefully we'll hit the ground running. We're, you know, the grant's sitting there, and it's just going through the process. So I think it's done finally. We'll see. But by January, I'd say at least we should have that done and complete, and everybody should be off and running. So the budgets are here for the next year. We're ready to go. I wanted to say this about the product before I hand this over. Oops, thank you. Gotta keep doing that. Version 1.2.0 is released. It's on the website. All right, it's on GitHub. We went ahead and created a Docker version only. All right, so you can do Docker Compose. Even I could do it. All right, I am definitely not a CI/CD guy. I'm more of a developer. So I got that running in about 15 minutes on my system. So you can run the Docker Compose command and have the whole thing running local. We have been very busy. If there's time, I don't know how much time there will be. Just to catch up at the end on the product stuff, there's been a lot of changes. We've got a lot of performance out of the system we're really running right now. I'll explain, because the first question is always, why are you using NATS versus Kafka, for example? And there's a definitive reason for that. So at that point, I'll give it to Reica. Thank you. Too many things.
Thank you, Greg. Firstly, shout out to Simeon. Thank you for adjusting your schedule. I appreciate you. Good morning, honored guests, Mojalo community, friends and colleagues. I am deeply honored to share the stage with my 2 brilliant colleagues from the FRMS team. My name is Reica, and I'm the 3rd person within this FRMS team. Clearly, 20 minutes is insufficient to cover this vast topic. But I quickly want to cover some very essential components of money laundering and fraud. Now, I will quickly cover these 4 topics. Fraud and money laundering are distinct from each other, but they are inextricably linked to each other. They are similar in that they both share the financial crime compliance frameworks, and also they share similar components of frameworks like policies and procedures, risk assessments, control environments, reporting, monitoring, training, and also they require effective and efficient tools as well as competent resources to manage within an organization. I'm going to briefly touch on global regulatory shift in respect of fraud developments. There is a lot happening very quickly in this space, and why we need to keep an eye on it to ensure that we do not go down the route of having unintended consequences when implementing new regulation and new requirements in respect of fraud. We need to ensure that we firmly keep our eye on what we intend, and that is protect the vulnerable and the marginalized, and that we do not steer away from ensuring that we promote financial inclusion as well. We need engagement with policymakers, regulators, and industry players as the new fraud requirements become mainstream within our countries and our industries. I will briefly talk about scams from a high-level global perspective, and talk about fraud typologies with a South African flavor, a South African winning Springbok flavor. To all of you that supported the All Blacks team over the weekend, shame on you, and commiserations. So to talk about money laundering and fraud, I'm going to take it back to basics. To understand what money laundering is, in its very basic essence, is obtaining money from criminal offense, putting it into the financial system, and getting it out as if it has been legitimately earned. So that in its essence is money laundering. Money laundering typically takes place in 3 different stages: placement, layering, and integration. However, with modern techniques, money laundering does not strictly adhere to these 3 stages. Many movies are based on money laundering, and if you have an interest in this topic, that picture is of Bryan Cranston from Breaking Bad. There are other movies based on money laundering like Billions and The Wolf of Wall Street. And if you do want to become a professional money launderer, I think your guidebook is really Breaking Bad. In order to engage with money laundering, you need what is called a predicate offense. So the predicate offense generates the funds to launder. Why is this important? It is important because the predicate offenses are codified in a country's criminal code and varies from country to country. Predicate offenses give rise to money laundering. Now, there are many examples of predicate offenses, all listed on the slide. You would find that fraud is actually a predicate offense, okay? In the EU 6th Anti-Money Laundering Directive, you will find additional crimes like environmental crime, cybercrime, and corruption as well. A lot of people ask about tax crimes and whether or not they are a predicate offense. In most countries, yes, it is. So any proceeds of tax evasion, for example, eventually ends up in a criminal activity of money laundering, where you use the proceeds of tax evasion in a financial system. Turning to fraud. So a simplified definition of fraud is the crime of obtaining money or property by deceiving people. Now, fraud is becoming a lot more topical from a regulatory perspective. A lot more organizations and regulators are paying close attention to fraud. And it is definitely mainstreaming globally. Now, traditionally, fraud, AML, regulatory compliance, counter-financing of terrorism, and sanctions compliance has taken center stage. We all know of the many AML fines issued to the big banks like JP Morgan, HSBC, Citi, and the like over the many years. We also know about all of the South African banks that we also find in the recent past for failures in money laundering control. That has brought fraud, AML firmly into view in the recent past. Regulatory compliance as well has been a firm favorite in terms of mis-selling, insider trading, market manipulation, etc. It has been the focus of regulators around licensing requirements and non-compliance with licensing requirements as well in the financial services sector predominantly. Counter-financing of terrorism became mainstream post 9/11 when FATF amended their recommendations to add the 9 recommendations in respect of terrorist financing. Sanctions compliance has been mainstream since the Iran nuclear deal, subsequently the war on Ukraine, and now with the conflict in the Middle East, sanctions compliance is very important. However, fraud is now definitely front and center on the regulatory agenda. Rampant increase in fraud, we need to do more to protect consumers, and regulators and policymakers are doing a lot more to ensure that there's frameworks in place to enable fraud prevention, detection, and management. So I'm going to briefly touch on some global regulatory developments. The cycle of regulatory change and reform is getting shorter, okay? Public-private partnership is driving fraud agendas quicker. Collaboration is moving slowly, but it is moving, yet economic crime and in particular fraud persists and is growing at an astounding rate. To this end, the seismic shift in global regulatory developments related to fraud starts with, for example, FATF. In the last plenary session, which was held at the end of last week or beginning of this week, FATF changed certain recommendations to provide for countries with enhanced tools to more effectively freeze, seize, and confiscate criminal property, both domestically and through international cooperation. It revised recommendations that require countries to have policies and operational frameworks that prioritize asset recovery and establish non-conviction-based confiscation regimes in their legal systems. What this means is that fraud will become front and center at local level from a country perspective, and fraud management will become mainstream in our regulatory and legal frameworks. To my earlier point, to get ahead of this, we need to ensure that we engage with regulators, policymakers, to avoid unintended consequences, and also stymie financial inclusion. The leader in terms of regulatory developments relating to fraud is the UK. The UK enacted the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Bill recently, and this is going to have a big impact in terms of how fraud is managed. This act creates what is called a criminal offense of failure to prevent. Now, in practical terms, what this means is that organizations will need to put policies, frameworks, and tools in place to prevent fraud. A good example of this will be a transaction monitoring tool, for example. Staying within the UK, In June of 2023, the UK Payment Services Regulator made it mandatory for banks and payment firms to reimburse victims of online fraud within 5 days. Now, both the sending and receiving banks will be equally splitting the reimbursement costs. The terms and conditions and unique requirements around this is still to be determined, as the UK is giving the Payment Services Regulator more powers to enable this development within this ecosystem. So my prediction on this is that reimbursement in terms of sending and receiving firms will become stock standard across the globe fairly soon. Scams at a high level from a global perspective. The Global Anti-Scam Alliance 2023 Global State of Scams report put forward some astounding statistics. Now, it is a well-researched and comprehensive report that covers 52 or 53 countries. It surveyed over 50,000 participants and organizations in terms of this report. Developing countries appear to lose much higher percentage of GDP in respect of scams. Worst hit is definitely Kenya, which lost nearly 4.5% of its GDP to scams. What is emerging from this report and various other reports is a pattern of re-victimization, where a fraudster targets the same victim 2, 3, and 4 times. Fraud reporting remains a complex problem that needs to be dealt with, and a lot of work needs to be done in this regard. Now, in order to give my colleague Justice time to present as well, I am quickly going to put up, and this presentation is available, fraud statistics from the South African Fraud Prevention Services. Now, from 2022 to 2023, fraud in South Africa, scams has increased 150%, employment fraud increased by 57%, impersonation fraud increased by 53%, and money muling increased by 44%. That is year on year from 2022 to 2023. There's a 37% year-on-year growth in number of fraud incidents and 15% losses in the first 3 quarters of 2023. This gives you the scale of the global fraud problem and the fraud problem from a South African perspective as well. Therefore, we need better fraud monitoring tools to be able to prevent, detect, and manage fraud better. I'm not going to go through this slide, but this is a typical South African view of the types of frauds happening in the country at the moment. Now, turning specifically to fraud detection in Akuta, we have identified 266 typologies for instant payments so far, 92 related to fraud and 174 related to money laundering and supporting typologies. We have implemented 31 typologies, configured 31 typologies on the platform, making use of 33 rules. New rules take about 2 days to develop, and the typology composition is a configuration process that is quick and easy. My final slide. Fighting fraud is going to take a lot more work. A lot of work has already been done in respect of level 1 principles, global and regional efforts, involving public-private partnerships, but a lot more is required to protect the most vulnerable people impacted by fraud. Better technology-based solutions, for example, like Akuta. Meaningful collaboration is key, including public-private partnerships, data sharing to enable detection within an ecosystem, Global and regional policy requirements relating to fraud needs to be enhanced and aligned. For example, like common taxonomy needs to be built. Capacity building, developing fraud skills related to fraud skills and resources, training, research, and collateral. Over 20 years ago, we had very few anti-money laundering specialists within the communities, and now, and a lot of work was done to develop money laundering specialists. We now need to do the same for fraud specialists within our countries. Fraud utilities like CIFAS in the UK, South African Fraud Prevention Services, and Global Anti-Scam Alliance need to collaborate, and we need more of these in country across the globe. Robust enforcement, higher prosecution rates, and definitely asset recovery to ensure that crime does not pay. The asset recovery component has been looked at by FATF, and that is coming in the amended FATF recommendations. With that, I will turn it to you, Justice.
Thank you. So, do we still have time left? I'm tempted to stay up here until you tackle me. Or maybe you'll chase me around for a bit. Hi, everyone. I'll keep this quick. I don't want us to take up too much of your time, but this is our quick product update. So we have, for those not familiar with our product, we are a transaction monitoring solution that sits between you as a switch or a financial services provider and the fulfillment of your transaction. So you would route your transaction into the platform, and then we would evaluate it using our rules and our typologies to give you a sense of whether or not that is a acceptable or safe transaction. And then you will decide through a case management intervention whether you would like that transaction to proceed or not. In the last, I suppose since the last time we were here in Kigali as well, we have been very busy on the platform. We had a code review early on in Cape Town. I think that was around April, where one of the senior leaders from the Linux Foundation had walked us through some of their principles for the code, and we had identified a number of things that we could improve in our own platform and our approach to how we put some of the things together. But over the last 6 months, or maybe 9 months even, our biggest focus has been platform optimization. So we have been chasing, and will continue to chase, I think maybe for the next 3 months, and conclude that in January, but 3,000 evaluations per second. So in our environment, an evaluation is not a transaction. We actually have to ingest up to 4, for example, modular transactions, which includes the quoting process and then also the transfer process to get to a single evaluation. So we have to do a lot more traffic to be able to get to our evaluations, but we are currently up to 2,000 evaluations per second. And we can do an evaluation with a turnaround time of less than 50 milliseconds end to end. Some of the major things that we have achieved. So we had a problem with OpenFast. We may have reported that to you previously. OpenFast, and I think it seems to be a bit of a trend at the moment. We suffered a licensing rug pull. So OpenFast changed their licensing agreements once we had committed to start using the product. We have a similar situation now with Arango as well, where Arango have moved to an SBL or BSL 1.1 license, which no longer serves our immediate purposes. So something that we also have to deal with. But we eventually removed OpenFast. OpenFast provided a RESTful microservices architecture that we could build the platform on. And we actually changed that into a NAT-based pub sub functionality, which gave us, I think, probably our biggest gain in performance. RESTful microservices turned out to be not quite as performant as a integrated pub sub layer. NATs did really well for us. I know the modular product uses Kafka. We opted for NATs. It's a slightly lighter weight in its implementation, and also scaling can be accommodated slightly more dynamically in a production environment. And then we also implemented protocol buffers for our inter-services translation. So we tried Fastify. and then ultimately settled on protocol buffers as a more a faster option. And then through collaboration with the Node.js team, they've given us some really good insight into Node.js optimizations as well, and we had some significant gains out of the Node.js optimization. I'm really looking forward to their support for the Mojaloop community as well, to see what their input could deliver in Mojaloop's performance. And then we made some changes architecturally to the product. So we streamlined and we consolidated some of our services. So we no longer have a discrete data preparation step that is now performed as part of the transaction monitoring service API. And then in the channel aggregation, we collapse channel aggregation into transaction aggregation to make that a slightly shorter journey. We skip a hop, which gives us better performance at the end-to-end. Probably one of the biggest architectural changes we had made is we changed the rule processors. So initially we had developed our 33 rule processors with a whole team of developers, and everybody, we had worked off a basic template, but we extended the metaphor of the template into a library and a wrapper, almost an executor that executes rule code in a very small part of a rule template. All of the major common functions have been abstracted and runs in the executor, and then the rule code itself, which ultimately amounts to basically the query that interacts with the database to do your historical and behavioral analysis in real time. That query and the processing of that query is then effectively the rule processor itself. So we were able to iterate over all of our performance optimizations much quicker. With our team of developers, we were able to overhaul and rewrite all of the rule processors in about a month. And then after that, an update to all of the rule processors, for example, to implement protocol buffers took less than a week. So that helped us a lot to speed up our turnaround time in the delivery, and also helped us to optimize the platform faster because we could make more changes quicker. We did a whole lot of other things, which I'm not going to go through in great detail, but you could read this in the presentation afterwards. Some of the highlights for me is we had originally written 250 test cases for all of our rules. And then when we implemented NATS, we couldn't use Postman anymore. So we had to face the prospect of rewriting all of our test cases in something else. So our developer who worked on the NATS implemented a RESTful proxy for us. So we were able to do individual unit testing of all of our processors by interacting directly with the publishing and the subscription topics through a REST interface, which was actually quite useful for us. Greg had already mentioned the Docker Compose, which is also really cool, I think, because you can actually implement Docker in your own, the platform in your own environment via Docker Compose straight out of our GitHub repository. And then just to wrap up, we still have quite a bit of work that we want to do, but we are now in a position where we think that the platform has most of the features that people would want when they go into a production environment. So we are now really looking for POCs and implementations so that we could put customer requirements from the community or our community into the product to keep on enhancing the product for the benefit of everybody else. The product is fairly stable. Our functionality at the moment is fairly static. Two major features that we do still want to include is sort of the ability to block and allow transactions based on operational controls. And then also batch processing, I think, is the big next feature for us. And after that, just a couple of extra things, make the platform more stable, more robust, and add whatever features our community would want. And I think that is it. Also coming up, I think we need to have a look at Arango. Matt's also helping us with talking to the open source community at Arango. The BSL 1.1 license doesn't suit our purposes and our use case at all. If we can't get any support from Arango for that, then we are unfortunately going to have to look at an alternative solution for our database provider as well. Thankfully, with all the work that we have done on the platform to put everything into libraries and to abstract the code away from the database, that change would probably take about a month to execute and maybe another month to do the testing and the quality assurance. And I think that is it. There's just a snapshot of our current landscape with all of the icons. New is Jupiter, and everything else, Nats and Protobuf, everything else is still pretty much as it was. Thank you very much, everybody. We look forward to growing with you. We have been greatly inspired by the Mojaloop community's growth, as has been evidenced over the last couple of days, and we look forward to following in your footsteps. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Anyone with a quick question? Just about one. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for the good work. I would like just to learn more about this Equita platform. Does it have a visual interface to monitor the AML and CFT activities?
Hello. Yes. So we are a software engine first and foremost. So you pass your transactions in, and we typically expect to post results to a case management solution. We have learned that not everybody has a case management solution ready. So we have one open source option, and our system integrator, Cybran, has also attached their own internal case management to the platform. But the visualization of the results would typically come from the case management solution after the platform has done its work.
Okay. I was just asking because when we interact with central banks and financial intelligence authorities, they want to have a link to control the fraud management activities that are happening in their jurisdiction. Thank you.
Can we please talk about that? Because then we can add that requirement into our backlog as well, and then we can look at how we can meet that.
Okay.
We have added Jupyter notebooks into the platform, which gives us the ability to run queries over platform data. But there's also our case management solution, and if there are specific reports and views that you need, we can certainly add those.
Okay, thank you.
James here.
Thanks. You said there is an open source case management tool.
Yes.
What's that called?
What is it called? Nuxio.
Nuxio.
Nuxio
Okay.
is the one that we have integrated with so far.
Fantastic. So off the shelf, your platform does have a case management platform that could be used with it. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, understood. Yeah, thank you. That's fantastic. Thanks, guys.
Rob has a question.
Yeah, Rob, make it snap. Thank you.
This is actually going to be a request because although Nuxio is there are sizing limitations. If anybody is working on large scale open source workflow management tools, please do. I'm volunteering for the team to start looking at those things to see how we can progress that, because it's a fundamental requirement for CBC that most of their tooling is open source. So having something that can scale to 21 countries, no big ask. Oh yeah, it is. Anybody working on that, please do come and talk to Justice and the team, but happy to liaise on that as well.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Round of applause for the team. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.